It's a wonderful day in the homiehood, a wonderful day for a homie. Won't you be my homie to Taro? I did want to cover some of these stories. Uh, I did read this last night. Vancouver mayor criticizes Poilievre for hell on earth comments, which was kind of just like a bit shocking. This is Ken Sim, the Vancouver mayor elect. Oh, is he not the mayor yet? He's basically going to be the mayor, right? He just hasn't been inaugurated or whatever. So he's fighting back against Pierre Poilievre, who is depicting decriminalization of drugs in BC as hell on earth. Which is just really just anti-science. It goes against pretty much everything we know about the opioid epidemic, and we should be securing and working, or at least looking at this unique kind of case study to see what we can implement in other parts of Canada. So David Eby is the premier of BC, and is saying here that predatory drug dealers and people with serious addiction issues, we need the resources to help those people. So part of that is a safe supply of drugs, and it's just really, really kind of inconsiderate for Pierre Poilievre to be inserting itself in this narrative when he really just like doesn't believe in the science of the situation. So we have our skepticism about David Eby and Mayor Ken Sim. They have been increasing police funding over there, which is also not part of the solution. So it is unfortunate that there's a lot of incompetence at pretty much all levels of government happening here. So I'm just actually cherry picking. I wasn't planning to do this, but the other story here, a bit of a pop culture story. Netflix is cracking down on password sharing, and apparently you're going to have to sign into like your home Wi-Fi at least once a month in order to keep your Netflix on its account. So it means that you're not going to be able to share with like your family members or whatever. I don't even know. It just seems like a really kind of like stupid idea. It's not something that's going to be that popular if you consider how many other streaming services there are, and how popular they've kind of all become. Netflix was kind of like the standard. It like was so ahead of the game, but I feel like in recent years the quality of their production has gone down a lot, and some of their shows I'm like, ugh, like how did you spend this much money to produce a show this bad? So I feel like they've fallen off, and I mean, I don't personally pay for Netflix, but I guess if things are going this way, I might have to if I want to stay with them in the near future. Which, to be honest, not I don't really care. The quality of their shows has not been great. The best thing about Netflix is that they have all the Ghibli movies over there, and you can watch them anytime you want. But other than that, I don't even know what I would need Netflix for. Um, Moving on in this horrible, horrible prediction, apocalyptical news here is that Quebec's groundhog Fred Lamarmont died. Meanwhile, Wyerton Willie and Shubenacadie, Shubenacadie Sam, okay, are at odds over spring's arrival. So, oh, this is a picture of Wyerton Willie. What about Fred? Fred Lamarmont, sadly has passed away. Fred Lamarmont um, told the crowd that had gathered in anticipation of the rodents' annual prediction or sorry, I guess they told the crowd that Fred Lamarmont is dead. So imagine actually going out there. It was like minus 20 degrees, and you're there probably, maybe you brought your kids, and you're like, hey, if the groundhog sees its shadow, then like there's going to be, I don't know. I don't even know how it works. 6 more weeks of winter or whatever. And then like they come out and they're like, the groundhog is dead. And what does this mean? What does this really mean if you're a superstitious person and you believe in this groundhog tradition? I think what it truly means is that global warming is coming for us all. And not only is there going to be 6 more weeks of winter, there's going to be in the near future 12 months of winter year round. Or, depending on where you live, 12 months of hot, hot heat, both of which situations will be completely unlivable to the average human. So we really need to watch our asses here, because we are literally playing with fire, and it's just a matter of time until parts of the earth are completely ablaze, if not completely frozen, like the Avatar for 100 years. Okay, moving on. Bill C-11 has cleared the Senate, um, and so the Senate has called for many amendments to this Bill C-11, which is the streaming bill or something. What is it? Hold on, I got it here in chat. Bill C-11, or is it all one word? Bill C-11, which is the Online Streaming Act. Okay, I got it. And so a lot of Canadian filmmakers, TV producers are saying that, hey, there's some things in these amendments that are going to not be fair to us. And it's kind of like counterproductive because it could potentially favor American streaming platforms who employ Canadians. And, why would that be? That would be kind of silly. We want to encourage people who are here in Canada to keep their productions Canadian, and incentivize employing Canadians, and setting better standards in the Canadian film industry. However, there are complaints that this is not the case, and this is actually going to hurt Canadian media producers. So one great thing, I guess, is that they have stated that it's not going to affect YouTubers and independent creators such as myself. So I guess in that sense, digital creators will not be regulated by this bill. Although we also don't really know. So this is something that has been like amended by the Senate. All of the amendments are probably not going to be approved, although they are saying a great many of them will be approved. And so this is going to Parliament, and it could be potentially passed as early as next week. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on it. There's been a lot of debate about it, although the debate has kind of been lackluster. Everyone is kind of like confused, and nobody really understands what's going on. There's a lot of heavy language, heavy reading around it. It's like hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents, and it's really hard to understand how this is going to have an effect on the Canadian film industry, if not streamers like myself. So we'll be keeping an eye on it. Moving on, Merit Styles. I realized, thanks to this article, that it's pronounced Marit Styles, and I've been saying Merit, so I'm gonna try my best to say it correctly. Marit Styles. That's an article here in the Globe and Mail, and it's kind of just like a fluff piece saying like, "Hey, Marit Styles is like ready to go," and her critics will say that she's like Andrea Horvath, but a latte sipping version from downtown Toronto, and she's fighting back against that narrative that she's a Torontonian. For one thing, she was born in Newfoundland, and she's kind of built a life for her own here in the Greater Toronto area. I believe she's the MPP for Davenport, which is a district in Toronto. And they're kind of just pumping her up in this, which is a bit weird because you don't often get the Globe and Mail doing cover work for the NDP. And I often see them, they're often just like pushed down to like third party status, even in Ontario where they're the official opposition. So it's really interesting. I learned a couple things about Marit in this article. For one, that she worked for a decade as a researcher and bargainer with ACTRA, the National Union of Professional Performers. And in addition to being a mother of two, she's a former Queen's Park staffer and school board trustee. She was president of the federal NDP. So one thing that this article fails to do is kind of like launch some criticisms towards her, which I think there are some, and there are some legitimate ones. I've seen people on Twitter bring up that her husband is a capitalist, or involved, is kind of like antithetical to what the NDP represents. I'm gonna have to do a little more research on that. And I think my concern, especially learning that she was the president of the federal NDP, is that she kind of represents the NDP establishment. And as we know, they have become increasingly more like liberal, neoliberal over time. And This article ends because, again, it is like a fluff piece, very interesting. We are the party of labor, of working people, Marit says. We will never be afraid or ashamed of that. And I understand the NDP, they need to go really hard on this rhetoric, but you don't do that by just saying we are the party of working people. It's like, okay, well, show us. Stop letting Pierre Poilievre and Doug Ford dominate this narrative that puts them in the light as the working class people, because they're not. Conservatives, fundamentally, they can never be the party of working people, but they are capturing that narrative right now. So instead of saying that you're the party of working people, like, show us, you know? And I hope that Marit, yeah, is able to demonstrate that going forward. So, also moving on, some good news. I think the federal government introduces legislation to delay changes to the MAID law until next year. So this is the medically assisted. What does the I stand for? Medically assisted induced dying. Oh, geez, am I getting this right? MAID acronym. Medically assisted in dying. Okay. Um so this is something that has kind of been like slowly rolling out. They were hoping to extend this to people who are facing mental health problems and not just physical problems. So obviously that is a very controversial kind of move because as they say in this article here, psychiatrists, they're not really, there's no real way to predict the success rate of people who are suffering from mental health problems and their ability to get out of it. It's a very like broad range. Some people are successful at getting out of it with the right treatment. Some people are not, and may want to choose MAID, but also, like, at what point do you get them to choose MAID? It could be at a point where they're at a very low, they may recover somewhere down the line. So I'm glad that they're pushing this off. Um, One thing that we need to emphasize here is the practice of MAID is predominantly low income and marginalized patients. And, we need to remain critical of expanding this to people with mental health because, again, it can affect people who are at a certain intersectional lens more than others. It's not something that's going to be applied across a broad spectrum to a certain amount of people. We know, obviously, people who are unhoused, people who suffer from addiction of all kinds, people who are low income or living in poverty, like those obviously are going to be people who have more mental health issues. And Canada has not done its due diligence in creating those, affordable housing projects, addressing poverty. And we don't really have any, like, we don't have universal mental health care. How can you have a system that allows you to choose death um, and assisted dying before it allows you to choose access to mental health care, right? So I think from a philosophical standpoint, I believe in bodily autonomy. I think that MAID could potentially be a good thing, but not within the context of the society that we live in, where people are, pushed out of the services that they need to access in order to improve their lives before choosing medically assisted death. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on this as well. Okay, this is from Sylvain Charlebois, aka the food professor, who I've criticized on this channel before. Loblaws lifting of no name price freeze shows discount grocery is in Canada is an illusion. So I guess this was like a bit of a refreshing take from Sylvain, aka food professor, who's had some really bad takes on Twitter. But basically, in this article, he's saying that we live in an illusion of choice. Even the discount grocers in Canada are not actually true discount grocers. Not like they are in some European places and European cities. Um, just because, well, they are owned by the same three companies essentially. And it's kind of like the price of gas, right? Like, sure, there's different companies, but they all work together to set those prices, right? And it's the same with the three companies. It's like, it's a not, what is it? It's not really a duopoly. Is it an oligopoly? I don't know. It's one of the opolies. Um, so it's a small, yeah, it's an oligopoly, right? And they all kind of like collude to set these prices because it benefits them all. And the funny thing is, because of course it's the food professor, and we disagree with him from a political standpoint. His conclusion is that we need more competition in Canada. So it's kind of like this like ridiculous buildup, because he's saying like, hey, there's competition, but the competition is all working together because to screw us over. And his solution is, well, we need more competition. But then what is stopping these big three names from snatching up those new competitors once again? And we end up with three big names still, or we end up with four big names who are doing the exact same thing. So he's so close here. Mr. Sylvain Charlebois, the food professor, he's so close to drawing some sort of like great conclusion, but then he just is a capitalist and in the on the taking money from people like Galen Weston, and he just concludes that, well, what we need to solve this problem created by capitalism is more capitalism. So he's so close. He's so close. And what I would love to see is just like, if we want some competition, why don't we nationalize a grocery chain? Why don't we make it so that these are the true prices in at least one of these stores? As soon as you see a real competitor who is a not-for-profit or just looking out of the interest of Canadians, you will see the rest of these prices come down. But he's not calling for that. He's calling for another competitor in the private sector, right? But also, there's other things we can do. We can tax these companies more for making their record profits, and but again, he has the right diagnosis, I think, but he somehow arrives at the wrong conclusions because, well, he has I think it's partly to do with his ideology and where the money is coming from, because he's in the mainstream media all the time. Another interesting article that was on the front page today: police body cameras are touted as an accountability tool, but getting the footage is a challenge. So this is making a comparison between how easily the footage comes out in the US. For example, the footage about with Tyree Nichols, which has started another wave of the Black Lives Matter civil rights movement in the US. It's not as easy for that footage to come out in Canada, and there's all these kind of like legal tie-ups. So even though the police have body camera footage, and in many cases they are praising that, oh, the police, this is something that makes them more accountable. When you file a Freedom of Information Act and try to get that footage, suddenly you're met with all this red tape and you're unable to access it, and it's really difficult and expensive in order to access that footage. So unless essentially you're a lawyer, we might not be able to access this body camera footage. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was that what was it? Um okay, yeah, they come with a pro police perspective. And oh yeah, that's right. So what they essentially do, they say, you file a Freedom of Information Act, and they say like, hey, I want to access this video that you have because I have a witness here who is claiming that they were harassed, they were assaulted essentially by police, or they were racially profiled, and you have this video, and I'm asking for it under our Freedom of Information system that we have here in Canada. And the police will then say, sorry, we can't give you that information because it's part of like a labor matter that we are having like internally. So the catch here is that if a police officer is acting badly, um the police department will say, hey, this is a issue of labor, and investigate that internally, that action. And therefore, because they are supposedly self-regulating themselves, nobody externally can then access that video in order to hold their feet to the fire. So this saying that, hey, police acting bad, it's a matter of labor, is basically just an excuse. It's kind of like genius in a way. They're exploiting this system in order to make their investigations internal. So hopefully this is something that is going to be challenged. I think this is something that needs to be changed. And I hope that in cases like this one, for Hassani Ogilvy, and her son, who are seeking justice here from racial profiling, who is alleging that 3 officers mistook him for someone else, go figure, tackled him, put a knee on his neck, and tasered him in August 2021. They're asking for this video to even just use it in their legal case, and they're having trouble accessing it, let alone having that video released to the public. So this is something I think, if we're ever going to hold the police accountable, as they claim body cameras do, we need more access to this in the future. I would honestly love to see, like, we should be able to access their body camera footage like a live stream and watch them constantly. I don't know. That's a little dystopian for me, but it would be. I want to. If this is where our public dollars are going, and I disagree with body cams in the first place, but this is what they've done as an excuse to try to keep us safe. So I think we should have access to that footage if it is actually increasing transparency as they claim, which it's not. Okay, so this is kind of the story everyone's talking about for the last couple days. We've already released 2 videos on it on our YouTube, maybe 3 at this point. I don't know. So, but we are talking about it a lot. So the bloc leader, Yves-Francois Blanchet, is saying that Amira Elghawaby, who is in this special position to combat Islamophobia in Canada, Blanchet is saying not only does she need to be fired or let go, but also this position should not even exist. So it's actually quite wild that he's willing to go to this length to combat. He's combating somebody who's combating Islamophobia, which, if you follow that logic, kind of makes him Islamophobic. So we did a video on this yesterday talking about Pierre Poilievre and his response to this, and now Yves-Francois Blanchet is calling for even more action. And this article really just goes over some really basic criticism. One of the things is that the article that she co-authored was with Canadian Jewish Congress CEO Bernie Farber, who together opposed Quebec's secularism law, Bill 21. So it was very strange, because we even saw Pierre Poilievre call her anti-Semitic, which is for this piece that she co-authored with the Canadian Jewish Congress CEO. And it's just kind of this wild, I would say it's like a reflex for those who are supporters of white supremacy. Like, as soon as Amira got into this position, that reflex was triggered, and they say, no, this woman needs to go, no, this position needs not exist. And it's just like, it's so kind of like obvious. It's really going to come to a head, though. I think this is why we need the position, and I sincerely hope she does not give in to the pressure and resign. This is why we need the position, because Islamophobia, as Pierre Poilievre and Blanchet are demonstrating, is so mainstream, is so commonplace, that we need somebody to be combating it. The other thing this article says is that you're not going to find someone who has been a lifelong proponent of fighting Islamophobia, who has not publicly and very strongly come out against Bill 21, which is at face value like a racist bill. Even the Canadians, like, Civil Liberties Council or something like that, has said, hey, this bill is problematic and goes against like our Charter of Rights. But since it's Quebec and everybody is scared to fight Quebec because they need the votes, it's allowed to go on. Even the Quebec court said, hey, we're accepting this bill, which is very stupid, even though it's very concerning and it will specifically target Muslim women first and foremost. So it's like everybody knows, even the Quebec courts and even, Canadian Civil Liberties Council, like everybody knows that this is racist. This is systemic racism because it's being entrenched in their laws. And then the moment you call it out, you get all these reactionary takes from conservatives and the Bloc Québécois. And you know what? I genuinely think like Quebecers, like they should be ashamed. If this is something that resonates you, like the things that Blanchet is saying, then you need to take a hard look. We should be calling for the resignation of Blanchet and Pierre Poilievre because of this, because they are honestly engaged in disgusting racist behavior. Okay, lastly for today, I wanted to end it with some kind of like interesting tech news for all my autistic socialists out there who love trains. Um, there's a company, Alstom, planning a pilot project in Quebec to run a hydrogen powered plane. Or sorry, train. Plane would be cool too. So this is like a new tech project. This is in the business section. So obviously, investors are probably looking at this. But I also just think it's kind of fascinating, exciting development in rail technology. This is a hydrogen cell powered train that only releases water vapor into the atmosphere. So obviously, like part of the green transition. I love it. The reason I love this, well, for one thing, it's not even like an electric car or electric train, but it's like hydrogen powered. Like it's like that next level, going even beyond lithium mining and all of that, So for me, it's also public transit. It's not saying, hey, everybody should own an electric car and somehow that will save the environment. I don't believe that. It's still an extension of capitalism. It's just the newest thing, right? So this is at least public transportation. And it could be a replacement for the, as this is saying, 27,000 diesel locomotives pulling passenger and cargo trains in Canada and the United States. So this to me is just like something exciting. It's not something that's going to be happening soon. It's still in testing. It was developed in Germany and it's going to be coming here to Canada, at least in testing. And let's face it, we desperately need some public infrastructure like this in Canada, and I would love if it was kind of like utilizing this new technology of hydrogen cells. So something to look out for. And that is all for our news today. It's just a quick daily rundown that we do here on the show. If you're still watching after all this time, please don't be afraid to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We're almost at 200, and we're going to do a special stream when we reach 250 subscribers on YouTube. We're going to stream on YouTube instead of Twitch, and it'll just be a stepping stone on our goal to reach 1,000 people there. So thank you so much for listening. This is my homie Tutaro in the morning, and we do the news every weekday.